Hello and welcome in. I am Miss Kinghorn and we are back here in Planet Zoo. And yeah, we took a small little break because of the latest Sims 4 expansion pack. But now we are back here in our Red Lane Zoo. And today we are working on a habitat for the Giant Otter. And yeah, to give you a little bit of context of where this is, so just behind me at the moment is the second of the sloth houses that we built a couple of weeks ago, and just to the left is the maned wolf habitat as well. So we're kind of just filling in this nice little area, and we're kind of taking it all down to a nice little point, which is going to basically be the end of our zoo very, very quickly. I don't know quite how this all happened. I kind of was looking at it and going, we've got so many to go, we've got like 8 to go, we've got 5 to go. Like, we have like 3 more animals to put into the zoo. It's been so quick. All of a sudden, I really don't know how we managed to get quite so far through this so quickly, but yeah, unless there is any major sort of new animals for like Americas, or so like North America or South America, we're not going to be adding any more animals to the zoo. We only have like 3 left, I think. So yeah, what do you think? What animal is going to be next? Let me know down in the comments into there as well. And yeah, what do you want to see? If you have any ideas, any suggestions, any kind of feedback at all for this sort of zoo or concept or habitat or anything like that as well. Now, as I say, we are building for the Giant Otters. Now, this is slightly different to what they would really want. So, these animals tend to live in along sort of fast-flowing rivers and sort of big streams and things like that. They can access sort of like freshwater lakes and springs and ponds and things like that, but that's not really their desired kind of place for them to be. They kind of like to be in those big kind of rivers and things like that. But I have kind of created 2 pools in here, which I think is a little bit more realistic for them being in a zoo. I don't know, let me know what you think in here, but this is the biggest of the 2, and yeah, you can sort of see when I created this, I didn't want to sort of dig down for the paths. I kind of wanted you to be able to see this at like ground level sort of thing. So I have dug down slightly for the pools, and then I've also raised it up slightly for sort of the grasslands and the planting and stuff like that, and the land that we would normally see. Now that proved a little bit more difficult than what I expected. So this in here, I think just to get all of this right, this section here, it took me something crazy like 5 hours, and I spent a good maybe hour getting the swimming in the water right, especially in the second lake. You'll sort of see that in a little while in there, and I'll talk more about that. But for now, yeah, we have got this sort of glass waterproof barrier in here. So this is the one that stops the water coming through in here, because I didn't want a flooding in here, and yeah, it proved quite challenging to get it in. It looks a bit boring, so I have kind of placed this plaster pieces that I normally do around the bottom. It gives you a nice break from the footpath kind of terrain, and then I have gone along the sides and place them up there as well, and I've done little decorations. So I've changed some of the colours of the supports in there so that they are black as well. I think it just provides that really nice contrast between like the sort of soft concrete that I've got over the pathing in this area. I at the beginning of this zoo was like, no, we are not going to cover the paths, we're going to just use the natural paths, I'm going to save piece count, I'm going to do all that. Yeah, that worked until we probably got to the capybaras, when I realised that actually, because of the terrain, I couldn't get the paths quite so close as I would like in there. So basically from then onwards we've had these path coverings. Now there is path under here. As I said, I think it was last episode, it might have been the one before, I have had to reduce the number of people actually in the zoo. Originally I had it, I think, set for like 3,000, might have been 4,000. I have reduced that down to, I think in total 1,500. We are actually decreasing in there, and that is simply because the game is starting to lag a little bit for me, but I have something crazy like 700 animals in the zoo, and part of me is kind of like, yeah, we're too big, like that, it's causing the game to glitch, it's having problems, but I really don't want to lose any animals at this point. I'm like, I'm just gonna add in the bare minimum that I can really get in. Obviously some of the animals that are coming up are only going to be in pairs, or even just solitary animals, so I don't want to get rid of them at this point. I want to keep them in here. So the guests have gone down to a level where I think it's now a little bit more manageable for me to handle in here. But I have been waffling this habitat in here, so you can sort of see I'm now playing around with this second pool. Now we have this big sort of island in the middle that goes and it becomes a rockwork piece. I spent most of my time trying to work this out here. This is where most of my time went. I could not get those water level up any higher. It was, yeah, it was so weird, because I was like, I can do it. I know I can do it, I just don't know how I can do it. So I finally figured it all out. In there we had a kind of a combination of several things. I think the barrier wasn't high enough along the side, there wasn't enough terrain protecting it in places, and yeah, it was just, yeah, too much. This island does go, and I actually place it with a kind of a rock island. Now I was trying to make this accessible to the animals, so in my head I was like, oh, they can just swim up to it and kind of climb on. I've placed food there, I've done enrichment there, I've done all this, and then they couldn't do it. And so in the end I placed a log over the top of the water as well, like it had kind of fallen, and that they can like climb across the top of it, and or just walk across the top and it'll be fine. Yeah, no, they couldn't do that either. It was frustrating. I don't know, obviously they have no need for climbing, but I was like, they can just walk along a small little tree, it's quite a big tree that I use. No. So this is just a decorative item. I could have got rid of it and made this water a lot bigger for them, but style wise I really wanted it, and it's always that sort of toss up between, do I make it realistic, sort of stylized as to what I kind of want it to look like, or do I make it as sort of perfect for the animals and accessible for the animals as possible? And I think in here I just kind of went, they've got enough water, they've got more than enough water, let's just make this a little bit more detailed in here. Talking of detail, we are now placing lots of grasses and plants into this water section in here, so that if you do sort of look into it as a guest, it's a little bit more interesting than a giant pool of water. In here we do get some other bits and pieces in, but using lots of these sort of grasses and also some sort of lilies on the top here as well, just to kind of make it, and it also, if you're looking at it as a guest, it breaks it up slightly, so it's not just one giant pool. You kind of can see where the water line is, which I think is really good for this in here. If you are a guest, it gives you that sort of depth of it in here, and then placing some of these aquatic rocks in too, just to give it a little bit more detail work in there. The animals really don't mind. As I say, there is plenty of swimming space in here. My only real issue, and I do this every time I build, is because I don't have the animals in, I don't know how big the habitat has to be. So you actually sort of see over in the back here, there is no back barrier. That is where the hard shelter is going to go. Now the guests don't have, like, they can't see into here, they don't have access, they don't do any of that. so I could have moved it along kind of, and that's kind of why I hadn't created it at the beginning, because I didn't want to sort of set out how big this was all going to be, because I really did not know at this point in here how much land I really needed in there as well. So now we're just working on this second pool in here, lots of rockwork again, and then more planting. I love these, how these actually, like, they sway in the water current as well, which gives you a really nice area in there to look at as well. Now changing the shape of this island slightly to make it a little bit smaller. The back section in here was actually really small, and I didn't think the animals would actually be able to swim around here, so I've changed it out. I now believe they can. When I had a look at putting them in before I did the cinematics, I found that they could access around the back there, but I haven't actually like seen them do it. They spend most of the time in the other pool, which I kind of understand. It's a bigger, nicer area, but yeah, you know, I would have liked to see them in here as well. Here is this sort of log that I said about that I've just placed over here, and we also placed another one on the bottom of this lake in here, and also another way for them to kind of get into the water. They can just sort of walk straight off the rocks and in, but I thought it would give it a nice sort of detail in there, and obviously for like young and things like that are maybe just learning to swim, having a nice little walkway in there would be perfect. And then taking some trees that we used from the main walls and placing them in here too, just to give you a little bit more interesting and kind of make it feel a little bit more lived in. So I would imagine that these would, like, the animals would come up and scratch their claws, they'd scent mark against it, they would kind of rub all over it and do that sort of thing. Obviously in game they don't do any of that, but you know, I do what I try to do in here. But while we're adding in lots of enrichment pieces, let's have some facts in here. So, as I said earlier, these are native to South America, and they're actually the largest member of the weasel family. I did not know that. Yeah, I guess all otters are part of the weasel family, but I never knew. Anyway, they have a reach of up to 1.8 meters in length. Now that's like nearly 2 meters long. I suppose that's like head and tail, which I guess is quite big as well looking at them. But yeah, I was not expecting them to be quite so long in there, which is 5'11". So they're actually just longer than me. They're longer. Crumbs. Okay. Anyway. They are very social species, living in sort of family groups of up to 8 members. So obviously like the parents and then their children and then like offspring and stuff like that as well. And they are incredibly territorial. But yes, although, so they are actually peaceful but territorial and can show aggression to other sort of otters and sort of anybody trying to move into their territory as well. Now they live mainly along the Amazon River and its panhandles, so it's all sort of little offshoots and things like that. Unfortunately, they are listed as being endangered by the IUCN, and their population is actually decreasing as well. Obviously, river pollution, habitat loss, the sort of people as well coming into sort of contact with them as well in here. Now they are actually really suited to living kind of this half in the water, half on land. So they have really dense fur, which is incredibly watertight for them in there. They have their like winged like tail, where it's kind of larger at the body, and they can use that to help them swim and push themselves through the water. They also have their little webbed feet, as most amphibious animals do in there. But yes, they live pretty close to their feeding areas as well, so kind of creating areas on like riverbanks or in the riverbanks for them to kind of nest. And they obviously then enter the water, especially if they are like threatened by anything, they can easily escape down into there. They live mainly on a diet of fish, but they can also eat like crabs, turtles and small caiman as well, which I was not expecting. But they have no real natural predators other than humans, but they do compete for food with other predators, as well as sort of crocodiles and things like that in there, and obviously larger caimans as well, especially if they're eating the young in there as well. But here we are now building the hard shelter in here for them. This is, I kind of don't over decorate this habitat, or sort of this hard shelter in here. Some of them where I think the guests can see and where you kind of need that safety kind of barrier in there, I have sort of done a better hard shelter for them. This one, because they live in big family groups, I just kind of placed in like 3 stalls for them where they can be separated, but it's not really that much of a deterrent for the animals if they kind of want to all get together. I figured that if you do need to separate them for anything, you would like take them to the hospital or something like that in there as well. So that's kind of what I was thinking in my head as we sort of go around with this. But I wanted this to kind of be very in keeping with the other sort of hard shelters that we have in the area, because you can kind of see it in the background of this habitat from certain angles and things like that as well. So yeah, we've kind of gone for a half wood, half plaster kind of area in here, but we're now working on the inside. Now I only show you the front sections when I do most of the exterior work. Again, it's just something to kind of save time, because this takes a while. Shockingly, it took a lot time to actually get this all kind of in a position where I actually liked it. I feel like I'm very indecisive at the moment. I don't really know why. I think I'm kind of, not necessarily scared because we're coming to the end, but I'm unsure what to do. And yeah, I hope I can kind of get an idea and a proper concept for the next habitat, which you'll see in a couple of weeks' time. But yeah, let me know what you think, if you have what you're liking, what you're not liking in here as well. Lots and lots of plaster goes into this build. You know, I don't actually, when I'm recording this, I don't see how long it actually takes. Like, I'm just not consciously aware of how long plastering a wall takes. But here we are, finally complete. There we go. And now we're going to jump back out to the outside, and we're going to place some of these logs down in here as well, just trying to make it a little bit more interesting, as I said. And this build, because it's up on such a high level and where it is, I kind of use one of the planters. So the way you'll kind of access this sort of the viewing water areas for this is you have to kind of be funneled through quite a small, I think it's like a 5-meter path from the big plaza. It just sort of breaks it up slightly for them so that they don't see so many guests. So if you don't want to go and see them, you don't really have to, but I kind of figured it would be nice just to sort of funnel you through a little gap in here. So using sort of some planters with some tall plants in here, a couple of trees as well, just sort of breaks that all up, and it makes it quite a nice kind of quiet private area for the animals in here. Now there is a path literally like 4 meters away, but you really can't see it from that path. I have checked, and it is super kind of private little space down in here for them, which I think works really, really well. And yeah, it meant that this had to be slightly higher than what I really wanted. So this is not a 4 meter, this is like a 4.1 meter, and it just trying to change some of the height and things like that off of here as well. Now coming in and working on the interior areas, we kind of have these stores now using the Indonesian wooden panels that I absolutely love in here. We used kind of create these stores. So the shape of this was a little bit weird, because it kind of has this little cutout at the beginning, but we get there in the end. So we have one of these kind of very big stalls in here, which we just kind of nicely decorate out in kind of completely ridiculous fashion, because the animals can actually access all of this in here. And then we are going to create a little bit more of a gap in here. So these are kind of long stalls, but quite narrow in kind of their appearance in here, just so that if you do want to break them up for some reason but not separate them, I figured that would be a nice little way of doing that into there. But yeah, a little bit more detail work, and I do come through and place like the door hinges and stuff like that again. Now this is actually quite dark at this point. I haven't put any lighting in. I do that eventually, but we get there in the end of this. Now I do place down obviously some of the bedding and some enrichment in here for them, and as I said at the beginning, they tend to spend a lot of time in here. I don't know whether they're stressed or whether they just like their privacy, but they do spend quite a bit of time in here, kind of huddled up where they sleep a lot. And yeah, we get a sort of a staff door in the back here. We do also kind of have the habitat gate is actually outside, so there's no need for the keepers to actually go in here, but I figured a kind of pretend door that leads nowhere would be perfect in here. And it also gives you that sort of walkway area down the middle for here as well, and then a few more bits of enrichment as well, and also their water trough in here, because that thing still looks awful. And yeah, we kind of hide that as best as we can. And then placing in some support beams, because this is such a large open area, I kind of wanted to have some support for the roof in here. Now we are getting in the lighting finally. I should have done this at the beginning, but you know, this is me we're talking about. When do I ever do things in the right order? In here. And I've gone kind of quite simple with the lighting. I think it's just these little strips that we get in here. It just provides a nice little ambience in here. I don't actually think once they've placed, they don't even light up. But anyway, now I have just moved the floor basically up to the ceiling, and yeah, now we're getting the last little details in amongst here as well. So I think I shall leave this here, as we are coming up to the end of this video. If you have enjoyed it, then please give this video a big thumbs up, and you can comment down below. Let me know what you are liking most about this zoo and what animal you want to see next. Yeah, but I think for now you can obviously subscribe to me here on YouTube, or you can follow me on pretty much all social medias. The links to those are down in the description on my link tree, so you can check me out there as well. But I will be back in a couple of weeks with another habitat. But until then, alright, stay happy and stay building, guys. Alright, bye!